Most women grow up believing that if love is real, it should last forever. That if two souls feel a powerful connection, if the chemistry is undeniable, if the bond is intense, if the longing is mutual, then life will reward their devotion with a happy ending. But life does not bend to fairy tales, and the human psyche is far more mysterious than childhood stories dare to admit. Carl Jung once observed that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The question that few dare to ask is this: transformed into what? Real love does not always end in forever. Sometimes it ends in fire, sometimes in silence, sometimes in the kind of distance that aches long after the body has moved on. And sometimes real love doesn't end at all. It simply changes shape, existing forever between two souls who could not walk the same path. The truth is, some love stories are not meant to last. They are meant to awaken. There exists a kind of love that arrives not to comfort, but to challenge. Not to complete you, but to shatter every illusion you once clung to. Not to protect you from pain, but to force you to face it. This is the love that rips the mask off your soul and exposes your deepest fears. Fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough, fear of losing yourself inside another. This love is not gentle, it is volcanic. It erupts through the walls built around the heart and forces the unconscious to speak. In Jungian psychology, relationships are mirrors. Every person you fall for, every man you cannot forget, every bond that haunts you long after it ends, each one is a reflection of a part of yourself. When a woman meets a man who echoes her wounds, something powerful begins. He touches parts of her psyche that were never healed, never held, never understood, and she becomes obsessed, not with him, but with the unanswered questions of her own soul. Why does she feel drawn to him even when he brings her pain? Why does her heart ache for someone who can't meet her needs? Why does she stay even when she should walk away? Because part of her is not seeking love. She is seeking resolution. Her soul remembers betrayal, abandonment, and emotional starvation, and it is desperate to rewrite the past. So she doesn't fall in love, she falls into a psychological labyrinth disguised as love. She believes if she can finally make him stay, if she can finally make him choose her, if she can finally be enough for him, then the ache inside her will be resolved. But this is not love. This is emotional survival. The tragedy is this: some of the most intense love stories begin as trauma reenactments. Two souls orbiting the same wound, mistaking emotional chaos for passion, mistaking pain for depth, mistaking longing for destiny. It feels like fate, but it is actually the shadow calling them forward. The woman thinks she is chasing love, but she is chasing healing, and healing rarely comes in the arms of the one who broke you or the one who resembles everything that once did. Real love does not always lead to a happy ending because real love confronts the truth, and truth doesn't always align with desire. Sometimes love reveals compatibility, mutual growth, shared destiny, but other times it reveals imbalance. One heart ready to dive deep, the other terrified of intimacy. One soul craving emotional honesty, the other hiding behind distraction and detachment. One person expanding, the other resisting change. And in those moments, love alone is not enough. This is the harsh lesson life teaches again and again. Chemistry is not commitment. Connection is not compatibility. Attraction is not alignment. And love, no matter how intense, does not guarantee a future. The modern world romanticizes intensity, worships attachment, glorifies pain, and calls it passion. But passion without purpose is destruction. If love costs you your self-worth, it is not love, it is bondage. And no matter how hard you try, no matter how fiercely you fight, no matter how deeply you feel, You cannot force someone to meet you where their soul is not ready to go. And yet, here's the paradox. Even when real love doesn't lead to a happy ending, it still changes everything. It forces growth. It demands evolution. It erases naivety and replaces it with wisdom. A woman who has walked through the fire of love and loss carries a new power, the power of emotional clarity. She no longer confuses chaos with desire. She no longer begs for breadcrumbs. She no longer bleeds for attention. She no longer accepts half love while offering her whole heart. This kind of woman becomes emotionally sovereign. She understands that love is not measured by how desperately you hold on, but by how peacefully you can let go when a connection no longer honors your soul. She learns that endings are not failures. They are redirections. And the deepest kind of love is not found in possession, but in evolution. Some loves are not meant to be healed. They are meant to transform. When two souls collide with such force that they awaken the unconscious, it is not a sign of weakness or tragedy. It is a sacred initiation. These relationships feel spiritual because they are. They crack open the deepest chambers of the psyche and call to the soul, evolve or suffer. Most resist, some surrender, but no one remains the same. There comes a moment in every intense love when the illusion fades, when the heart, intoxicated by potential, sobers under the light of reality. The woman who once believed she could fix him, save him, or hold him together finally sees the truth. Love cannot be built on potential. It must be built on presence. But presence requires emotional maturity, and emotional maturity demands self-confrontation. The man who runs from his own darkness will always run from hers. He will long for her warmth, yet fear her depth. He will take her empathy but avoid her questions. He will crave her body but resist her soul. When he feels seen, not the surface he shows the world, but the hidden man beneath, he grows cold, defensive, distant. He senses that she sees through his shadows, and instead of rising to meet her, he withdraws to preserve his fragile ego, to protect the persona he has built to survive. Jung taught that every person wears a mask, not to deceive others but to hide from themselves. For some, love feels threatening, not because it lacks passion, but because it threatens to expose truth. And truth is terrifying to a man at war with himself. It is here that many women begin to doubt their worth. They turn the blame inward. Perhaps she was too much, too emotional, too intense, too demanding. She replays conversations in her mind, analyzing every word, convinced she pushed him away. But what she does not yet see is that her depth was never the problem. It was the mirror she held up that he could not face. Her emotional honesty forced clarity, and clarity is unbearable for someone living in denial. Not all men retreat from depth, only those unready to confront their own shadows. A man who has not examined himself cannot sustain true intimacy. He may desire love, but love demands self-awareness, and awareness threatens the ego's illusions. So he avoids vulnerability, but calls it independence. He resists emotional dialogue, but calls it peace. He stays guarded, but calls it strength. He clings to comfort, but calls it logic. Yet deep down, he knows. He knows he loved her. He knows she awakened something sacred inside him. He knows he may never encounter that level of connection again. But connection without courage dies. Love without responsibility withers. Desire without discipline collapses. And the truth he refuses to face becomes the truth that haunts him for years. The truth that real love visited him, and he let it slip away. So why doesn't real love always lead to a happy ending? Because love is not the only force governing human relationships. Fear plays a role. Ego plays a role. Childhood patterns, unhealed trauma, cultural conditioning, all of it shapes the path of a relationship. Two people may love each other deeply, but if they do not love truth more than comfort, the relationship becomes a battlefield of avoidance. The woman begins to shrink herself to maintain peace. The man numbs himself to avoid emotional demands. They do not grow together. They survive beside each other. And survival is not love. But a powerful turning point comes when the woman finally understands this sacred truth. She is not responsible for his healing. She can love him, but she cannot save him. She can inspire him, but she cannot choose for him. She can understand his pain, but she cannot carry it for him. Healing is a path walked by choice, not persuasion. And no amount of devotion can awaken someone who prefers to stay asleep. Here begins her awakening. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, but the kind that feels like a quiet rebellion inside the soul. She stops begging for love to be reciprocated. She stops overgiving to prove she is worthy. She stops performing emotional labor for men afraid to feel. And most of all, she stops waiting for someone else to choose her. Instead, she begins to choose herself. This is where her emotional power is reborn. At first, she fears detachment, mistaking it for coldness. But detachment is not absence of love. It is the wisdom to no longer force it. She learns to observe rather than react, to feel deeply without drowning, to love without losing herself. She discovers that her worth is not determined by who stays, but by who she becomes when others leave. And something extraordinary happens. She rises, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. She alchemizes heartbreak into self-awareness. She transforms longing into purpose. She turns abandonment into fierce self-loyalty. And in doing so, she reaches a truth very few are brave enough to accept. Sometimes the loss of love is the beginning of the soul's return to itself. What many never understand is that heartbreak is not just emotional. It is spiritual surgery. It cuts through illusions, rips away fantasies, and exposes the raw truth of the soul. When real love does not lead to forever, it feels like a betrayal of destiny, as though the universe dangled something sacred and then stole it away. But the universe does not steal. It reveals. It exposes what is misaligned, what is unbalanced, what is not yet ready. It strips, day, away what the ego wants to make room for what the soul needs. For the woman who loved deeply and lost, there comes a period of darkness that few speak of. She disappears from the world, not physically, but emotionally. Her smile becomes practiced, her laughter delayed, her presence quieter. She moves differently, as though carrying invisible weight. In this silent season, friends tell her to move on, to stay positive, to find someone better. They do not understand. She does not grieve, just the man. She grieves the mirror he held before her. She grieves the parts of herself that were awakened by love, only to vanish into memory. She grieves who she thought she was, who she thought he was, and who she thought they could become together. She walks through emotional winter. Days feel heavy. Nights feel endless. Memories replay like films she never asked to watch. And inside, a war takes place. The war between who she was and who she is becoming. She knows she cannot go back to the woman who once settled for breadcrumbs or confusion disguised as romance. She has outgrown passivity. She can no longer tolerate half-love, but she has not yet stepped fully into the power of the woman she is meant to become. She stands between worlds, no longer who she was, not yet who she must be. This is a sacred threshold. In Jungian terms, she stands in the liminal space between ego death and rebirth. Her old identity is dissolving. Her patterns are breaking. Her emotional code is rewriting. Ego itself. This stage feels painful because it is the moment when the psyche confronts the shadow. Her shadow whispers that she is unworthy of love, that she is destined to be abandoned, that she must become smaller, softer, quieter to be chosen. But her higher self speaks too, patiently, powerfully, reminding her that love is not proven through suffering. Love honors. Love respects. Love chooses truth over convenience. Real love does not punish the heart for being deep. She begins to question everything she once believed about relationships. She starts to see what she had been blind to, the ways she abandoned herself to avoid abandonment, the ways she tolerated emotional inconsistency because she feared losing connection, the ways she romanticized red flags because they felt familiar. This is where she understands the hard truth. The soul becomes attached not to what is good, but to what is known. If chaos was once home, the nervous system will mistake it for love. That is why predictable pain feels safer than unpredictable peace, but now she sees, and once the soul sees, it cannot unsee. She begins to reclaim her boundaries, not as walls, but as gates. She begins to trust her intuition again, not the fear inside her, but the quiet knowing beneath it. She stops chasing validation and begins seeking alignment. She realizes that love is not supposed to feel like emotional gymnastics. It does not require one to shrink, bend, or break to be worthy. Real love respects the essence of who she is. Real love does not fear her intensity. It treasures it. Real love does not confuse her mind. It calms it. Real love does not make her beg. It meets her halfway. And in this new emotional evolution, she learns something that changes everything. She does not need closure from him. Closure does not come from explanations. Closure does not come from apologies. Closure comes from acceptance. Acceptance that he was a teacher, not a lifetime partner. Acceptance that his role was to awaken, not stay. Acceptance that his inability to love her in the way she needed had nothing to do with her worth. Acceptance that love can be real and still not be right. So she releases him, not because she no longer cares, but because she finally understands the difference between attachment and alignment. Attachment begs to hold on. Alignment knows when to let go. Attachment fears the unknown. Alignment trusts the path. Attachment says, I need you to complete me. Alignment says, I am whole, with or without you. And when she releases him, she also releases the belief that love must hurt to be real. She releases the belief that passion must equal chaos, that intensity must equal anxiety, that love must be earned. No, love that must be earned is not love. It is emotional bargaining, and she refuses to bargain with her soul. This is the transformation. The moment she stops chasing love and starts embodying it. The moment she stops romanticizing emotional starvation and demands emotional reciprocity. The moment she stops waiting to be chosen and chooses herself, not as a trend, not as a slogan, but as a sacred way of living. She no longer measures love by how desperately someone clings to her, but by how consistently someone shows up. Her heart does not close, it expands. It becomes wiser, it becomes stronger, it becomes whole. And now, the kind of man who once intimidated her with his inconsistency no longer interests her. The emotionally unavailable no longer attract her. The player disguised as a romantic no longer charms her. What once consumed her now bores her. Why? Because she has changed her frequency. She no longer resonates with wounded love. She doesn't need games to feel alive. She is alive. She doesn't fear being alone. She fears betraying herself. And that is when everything shifts. There comes a moment when a woman who has walked through heartbreak no longer searches for love in the same places she once did. Something in her becomes exquisitely discerning, not out of fear, but out of deep self-respect. She understands now that love is not proven through emotional suffering, nor deepened through repeated betrayal. Real love does not wound the soul, It awakens it. It does not demand that she sacrifice herself. It asks that she expand into who she truly is. And for the first time she realizes the end of a love story is not always a tragedy. Sometimes it is liberation disguised as loss. Those who watched her from the outside thought she healed simply because she stopped crying. They assumed she was finally over it because she no longer spoke his name. But what they could not see was that she was not just healing from a person. She was healing from herself. From the version of herself that tolerated confusion, abandoned her own needs, and called it devotion. She was healing from the weight of emotional illusions. She was healing from the hunger of her inner child, the one who kept choosing emotionally distant men and calling them destiny. She was healing from the belief that she had to earn love to be worthy of it. This healing did not happen in grand moments. It happened silently, in the way she slowly stopped checking her phone for unanswered messages, in the way she learned to breathe through loneliness instead of running from it, in the way she sat with her emotions instead of throwing herself into distractions. Healing, for her, was not a loud rebirth, it was a quiet return to strength. And strength, she learned, is not hardened armor. It is soft, but unbreakable. It is gentle, but not blind. It is compassionate, but not naive. She stopped confusing loyalty with self-betrayal. A loyal woman is not one who stays no matter the cost. She is one who refuses to abandon herself for love. The woman she is becoming now carries a new kind of standard. Love must add to her peace, not destroy it. Love must spark growth, not emotional decay. Love must be an energy exchange, not emotional extraction. Yet this evolution comes with a price. Her high standards do not intimidate real men, only half-grown boys in adult skin. Her emotional honesty does not scare emotionally mature men, only those who fear being seen too deeply. Her boundaries do not reject love, they protect it. But not everyone understands this. And so, some call her cold, some call her too much, some call her intimidating. But she knows the truth. A woman who has faced herself can never again fear being misunderstood by those who refuse to understand. She no longer rushes connection. She no longer builds castles out of potential. She no longer invests in words. She watches patterns. She no longer waits for a man to decide whether she is worthy. She knows already. If a man wants a place in her life, he must arrive as her equal, not as a project she must fix, not as a storm she must survive, not as a void she must fill. For the first time, she is not attracted to chemistry alone. She craves emotional safety. And she has learned that emotional safety does not come from empty romance. It comes from emotional responsibility. But somewhere in this quiet evolution, something divine begins to happen. Her energy shifts. Her presence deepens. Her eyes no longer beg to be seen. They see. Her heart no longer searches outside. It radiates from within. And because she is no longer chasing love, love begins to find her, not in the form she used to seek, but in the form she never knew she deserved. This new kind of love moves slowly. It studies her and makes her feel safe. It seeks understanding, not control. It does not rush intimacy. It grows it from the soil of patience and genuine curiosity. It does not fear emotional depth. It dives with her. This love does not just want her laughter, it wants her truth. It does not just want her body, it wants her mind, her vision, her soul. This love becomes a sanctuary, not because it is perfect, but because it is honest. Yet before this love enters fully, she must pass the final test of transformation. She must master the art of emotional detachment, not from love, but from outcome. The world once taught her to cling when she felt something deep. Now, she learns to let go even when she cares, to remain peaceful even when uncertain, to remain open even when afraid. Detachment is not fear of love. It is the refusal to worship it. It means she can love a man and still choose herself if he cannot meet her truth. She can give her heart and still walk away if she must. Emotional detachment is the birth of true power. She no longer needs constant reassurance. She no longer needs to force connection. She no longer waits for a man to prove she is lovable. She already knows. And when a woman knows her own worth, love is no longer a question. It becomes a reflection. It is not something she chases. It becomes the energy she attracts. Now she understands. Real love doesn't always lead to a happy ending, because sometimes real love is not between two people. It is between a woman and her own rebirth. The heartbreak she once thought destroyed her was actually the doorway to the highest version of herself. What felt like loss was preparation. What felt like punishment was protection. What felt like abandonment was alignment. Nothing was taken from her. She was being redefined. There is a silence that comes after transformation. Not the empty silence of loneliness, but the sacred silence of alignment. A woman who has crossed the battlefield of her own heart no longer moves anxiously through life. She no longer seeks love as a cure for emotional wounds or proof of her worth. She moves with a deeper rhythm now, a timeless one, the rhythm of self-awareness. She has learned to trust timing, to honor truth, to follow energy over words. This is the woman who understands. The journey was never about finding love. The journey was about becoming it. Still, something remains unanswered in her. The question that lingers in every heart that has known deep love and deep loss. Why? Why would life give a connection so powerful if it was never meant to last? Why allow two souls to collide only to tear them apart? Why awaken something eternal only to demand that she let it go? The answer reveals itself slowly, as all truths do in the presence of wisdom. Because the purpose of love is not always union. Sometimes it is evolution. Some souls do not meet to build a life together. They meet to build a life within. They meet to awaken sleeping parts of one another, to burn illusions, to unlock potential, to test courage, to activate purpose. They meet not to walk the same path, but to point each other toward their own. This is why she now views her past with reverence rather than regret. That love was not a mistake. It was not wasted time. It was not failure. It was initiation. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it broke her. Yes, it demanded everything she thought she knew about love. But if a fire destroys illusions, is the flame cruel or holy? Every great transformation in history has required destruction before creation. Forests burn before they grow stronger. Stars explode before they shine brighter. Souls fracture before they awaken. Pain is not the enemy. Pain is the doorway. Pain is a fierce teacher, a sculptor of the soul. Real love, especially the love that doesn't last, forces the deepest encounter with the self. It doesn't just teach emotional lessons, it teaches soul lessons. Through heartbreak, she learned the sovereignty of emotional boundaries. Through longing, she learned that attachment is not devotion. Through disappointment, she learned to ground love in reality, not fantasy. Through absence, she learned that love is not possession, it is presence. Now she sees the greater pattern. Life never sends love to complete anyone. It sends love to reveal who they are. Only after that revelation does true union become possible. And now, she walks with a new kind of confidence, the quiet, unfaltering confidence of emotional wisdom. She no longer fears falling in love because she is no longer afraid of being broken. She has already walked through emotional death and discovered she cannot be destroyed. She can only be reborn. Yet this does not make her careless. Quite the opposite, she becomes intentional. Her heart is still open, but not aimlessly. She no longer invites chaos into her life. She protects her energy as if it were sacred, because it is. She invests her love where growth is mutual, where peace is respected, where effort is consistent. She no longer chases connection. She builds it. She no longer begs to be chosen. She chooses the right energy for her soul. In this new chapter, she no longer waits for a partner to bring meaning into her life. She already walks in her purpose. Whether her purpose is her craft, her healing work, her calling, her career, her faith, or her children, she draws from a deeper source. She embodies what Jung called individuation, the becoming of the whole self. She has met her shadow, embraced her truth, healed her inner child, and reclaimed her power. She has become rooted. A rooted woman no longer clings. She attracts. She does not fear losing someone. She fears losing herself again. And she refuses. A man must rise to stand beside a woman like this. Not rise in financial status alone, not rise in superficial charm, image, or ambition, but rise in soul. He must meet her in emotional depth. He must see her heart not as a playground, but as holy ground. He must be strong, not in silent pride, but in emotional responsibility. He must bring presence, consistency, and clarity. Because a healed woman is not impressed by potential. She honors truth. And truth always reveals itself in action. What she seeks now is a love that walks in discipline, not chaos. A love that understands that attraction builds connection, but character sustains it. She wants a man who is brave enough to have difficult conversations. A man who doesn't run when feelings deepen. A man who knows how to carry his own wounds instead of projecting them. A man who chooses her not just in moments of passion, but in seasons of challenge. She does not demand perfection from him, only honesty. She does not require worship, only mutual devotion. She does not ask him to complete her, only to build with her. And if life brings that love to her, she will receive it. But here is the most beautiful truth of all. She does not need it. The old version of her believed that love was something to find. The awakened version knows that love is something to become. Love is no longer a destination. It is her nature. Her peace is no longer negotiable. Her heart is no longer desperate. Her spirit is no longer hungry. She has returned to herself. And that is where life begins to bloom again. Love, in its highest form, is not a reward for suffering. It is the natural companion of truth. The woman who once believed that love was something to fight for now understands that real love does not require war. It requires the alignment, heart, mind, and soul moving in the same direction. She no longer chases intensity. She chooses stability with depth. She no longer confuses being wanted with being valued. She no longer fears solitude because she has tasted the most powerful form of love there is, inner peace. Now, her presence carries a different weight. She no longer speaks to be heard. Her silence speaks for her. She no longer performs softness to be loved. Her authenticity invites respect. She no longer fears emotional intimacy. She honors it with patience. She has outgrown emotional survival and stepped into emotional mastery. And emotional mastery does not mean she no longer feels pain. It means pain no longer controls her. People may wonder what changed in her, but she knows the secret. It wasn't time that healed her. It was truth. The truth that love without self-respect is a form of emotional poverty. The truth that longing is not love. Sacrifice without reciprocity is self-abandonment, and obsession is the nervous system screaming for familiarity, not destiny. The truth that a connection that costs peace is too expensive for the soul. And perhaps the greatest truth of all, love that is meant for her will never require her to betray herself again. She now lives by a sacred law, the law of energetic reciprocity. She gives only where there is equal exchange. She opens only where there is emotional maturity. She stays only where love flows in both directions. Not because she is closed, but because she honors the woman she fought to become. And life begins to reflect her transformation. She attracts people who are drawn to her peace, not to her wounds. She attracts conversations that stimulate her soul, not drain it. She attracts connections built on mutual devotion and fearless truth. She no longer fears losing people along the way because she knows the ones who leave are simply not aligned with where she is going. One cannot build a conscious life with unconscious love. She forgives the past, not to excuse it, but to release it. Forgiveness is not about forgetting. It is about freeing the heart from emotional captivity. She lets the story close. She thanks the man who unknowingly awakened her, not with words, but with evolution. She blesses what was and lets it become what it was always meant to be, a chapter, not a definition. And then, it happens. Peace becomes her default state. Not the fragile peace that depends on perfect circumstances, but the unshakable peace that comes from emotional self-loyalty. She is not guarded, she is guided. She is not distant, she is discerning. She is not cold, she is clear. Love does not intimidate her anymore. She welcomes it, but she no longer grasps at it. She knows that what is real will meet her where she stands. If love comes, she will meet it with grace. If it leaves, she will release it with dignity. She no longer negotiates with fate, she aligns with it. And alignment is not passive. It is a decision to choose truth over illusion, a decision to honor intuition over fear, a decision to let love flow naturally instead of forcing outcomes. This is emotional sovereignty. This is feminine power. This is freedom. And so the story returns to where it began, with a question. Why does real love not always lead to a happy ending? The answer lives in her now. Because some love stories are not meant to end in union. They are meant to end in awakening. Some love does not stay because it was never meant to build a home. It was meant to build a soul. She does not resent this anymore. She finally understands what life was teaching her all along. Love is not lost. It has only changed form. She smiles, not because she found a perfect ending, but because she found a perfect beginning. Hers. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.